That's how I ended up here. Nadezhda. Sanchersu. I'm sitting in my one-bedroom apartment in Queens, which I took out a mortgage on 3 years ago, and rereading the letter from HR. Our tech company is sending me to the Belgrade office for 2 years. Can you imagine? A whole 2 years away from New York City? I work for a large American tech company, one of those with full benefits, 401 kelvins matching, and health insurance. My job pays well, so I was able to afford this apartment. Nothing fancy, an ordinary one-bedroom in a mid-rise building. But it's mine. Well, more precisely, it will be mine once I finish paying the bank. I still have a long way to go before the mortgage is paid off. But here's the problem. I can't just abandon the apartment for 2 years. That would be pure stupidity. The mortgage payments would continue. Paying for an empty apartment would be like throwing money down the drain. The obvious solution was to rent it out. Let the tenants cover my payments to Chase Bank while I learn to make chivapi. I called Michael Stevens, a real estate attorney. I know. He had helped me with the paperwork when I bought the apartment. Michael, here's the situation. I began as soon as he picked up. I'm being sent to Belgrade for 2 years. I want to rent out my apartment, but I want everything done legally. No problems with the IRS. He chuckled. Nadia. It's simple. We'll draw up a lease agreement as required. Move-in inspection form. Property inventory. You'll just need to report the rental income on your tax return, about 22% federal plus state taxes. Or set up an LLC if you want to write off expenses. Keep all receipts. Utility bills. And don't forget to notify your mortgage company that you're renting it out. It's in their contract. Great. But then I started thinking about the apartment's condition. It was livable, but could use some updating. I found a crew through Angie's List, independent contractors with excellent reviews. On Monday, 3 guys arrived, led by foreman Tony. What are we doing here? Tony asked, looking around my place. We'll repaint the kitchen, replace the bathroom tiles with something modern, and fix up the hallway walls. There are still marks from the previous owner's furniture. 2 weeks. Maybe less. Tony estimated. But you can't stay here. Power tools. Jackhammers. The neighbors will complain to the super, and there'll be dust everywhere. I called Sarah, a friend who has a house in Westchester. I knew her guest room was empty. Sarah, can I crash at your place for a couple weeks? I'm doing renovations. Sure. Come on over. There's plenty of space. I packed the essentials and moved in with Sarah. The workers started the next day. I was so glad I got out in time, even when I stopped by after work to check on progress. The noise was unbearable. But I hadn't told my parents anything yet. I was waiting until the last minute. We have a complicated relationship. Everything seems fine on the surface. But they love giving unsolicited advice and making offers you can't refuse. My younger sister Lisa. Arshalu. It still lives at home. No surprise there, they spoil her rotten. She's been dating some guy named Eric for 6 months. He seems okay, but his job situation is sketchy. He does work Uber, DoorDash, whatever. Lisa doesn't work much either. She went to college. But I covered half her expenses because our parents said they couldn't afford it. 2 weeks before leaving, I finally worked up the courage. I called Mom. Mom, can I come over for dinner tonight? I have some news. Of course. Honey, I'll make your favorite. Lisa and Eric will be here too. I arrived at 6 with a bottle of wine. My parents live in a 3-bedroom ranch in the suburbs. They bought it when I was in high school. Definitely more space than my Queens apartment. Everyone gathered around the dinner table. Mom made her famous pot roast. I have to give her credit. She's an amazing cook. Lisa was glued to her iPhone as usual, barely looking up. So what's the big news? Mom leaned forward expectantly. I took a deep breath. The company is offering me a position in Belgrade. For 2 years. I'll be working in their regional office. My parents exchanged glances. I could sense their silent conversation from a mile away. Tell us more. Mom settled in more comfortably. I explained the duration, responsibilities, conditions. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Lisa roll her eyes. She always does that when I talk about work. Like it's boring, and beneath her attention. Sounds wonderful. Sweetheart. Dad nodded. We're proud of you. Thanks. But there's more. I'm planning to rent out my apartment while I'm gone. I can't just leave it empty. I have mortgage payments. The atmosphere changed instantly. My parents looked at each other again. Why let strangers in? Mom said slowly. Lisa and Eric could live there. That way you'd have peace of mind knowing it's in good hands. I nearly choked. What, your sister needs her own space? Mom continued. She and Eric are planning to get married. This would be perfect for them. I looked at Lisa, who suddenly perked up. Eric beamed like he'd won the lottery. Okay, I said carefully. If they want to rent it, I don't mind. I'll even give you a family discount, maybe 20% off, market rate. The silence was deafening. You could hear the neighbor's TV through the walls. Are you serious? Mom went pale. You're going to charge your own sister rent, Mom. I have a mortgage. That's why I'm renting it out, to cover the payments. But she's family. Mom's voice rose an octave. Lisa finally spoke up. Nadia, you're so greedy. You won't even let your own sister use your apartment. I help this family all the time. I couldn't take it anymore. Who paid for your college? Who lends you money whenever you ask? That's completely different. Dad cleared his throat. How is it different? You earn more. Lisa leaned forward. You can afford it. I earn more because I work my ass off. And I have bills to pay too. We're saving for Lisa's wedding. Dad interjected. And I'm paying a mortgage. How is your situation more important than mine? Lisa slammed her palm on the table. Because we're your family, besides. I don't want to live with Mom and Dad anymore. This neighborhood is boring. Yours is in Manhattan, close to everything. So you want a better apartment but don't want to pay for it, God. You're such a Lisa spat. Eric finally opened his mouth. Come on. Nat. We're not going to trash the place. We'll take good care of it. I promise. I'm sure you would. But I'm not running a charity. Silence fell over the room again. You could hear the dishwasher running in the kitchen. I think it's time for you to leave. Mom's voice was colder than a January morning in Buffalo. I think so too. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. No one said goodbye. No one walked me out. I just left. The drive back to Sarah's in Westchester was a blur. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Anger was boiling inside me. How dare they act like I owed them my life, like wanting rent for my own apartment was a crime. Sarah was in the kitchen when I got back. Hey. How was family dinner? She started to smile. Then saw my face. Shit. What happened? I told her everything. Word for word. Sarah shook her head. Nat. I'm sorry. But they've always put Lisa on a pedestal. I remember from high school, she could do no wrong. But they expected perfection from you. They turned you into the family ATM. I sat down at the table, holding my head in my hands. I know you're right. But it still hurts like hell. Sarah made tea, and we sat there until almost 1 a.m. She reminded me of all the incidents over the years, how my parents asked for money, how they put Lisa's college expenses on my credit card, how they treated me in general, like I was a walking bank with free services. You're doing the right thing, she said. Don't let them guilt trip you. I won't. But I feel like shit inside. The next 3 days were silent. No calls. No texts. Nothing. On one hand, it was a relief. On the other, it hurt that they didn't even try to understand. On the 4th day, I went back to check on the renovations. The guys had finished, and the apartment looked amazing. Fresh paint, new subway tiles in the bathroom, even updated the kitchen backsplash. Tony and his crew did incredible work. After they left, I sat in the empty apartment scrolling through Zillow and StreetEasy. A decent number of people had responded to my listing. But one couple especially caught my attention, David and Anna Chen. Both doctors at Mount Sinai Hospital. Perfect credit scores. Excellent references from previous landlords. Ideal tenants. Anna called that same day. Hi. This is about the Queen's apartment listing. Could we see it? I can show it the day after tomorrow around 2 p.m., if that works. That would be perfect. We're very interested. Great. I'll text you the address. 2 days later. I arrived about 10 minutes early and waited in the lobby. David and Anna showed up right on time. Punctual as Swiss clockwork. Nice couple. Both in their early 30s. Professionally dressed and well-spoken. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor. On the way up, I told them about the neighborhood. There was a Whole Foods around the corner and great restaurants on the next block. Sounds perfect. David smiled. Great location. Yeah. I loved living here. We reached my door, and I got out my keys. Well, here we are. I opened the door and stepped inside first. They followed behind me. And then I saw them. Lisa was sprawled on my couch in shorts and a tank top. Eric was making a sandwich in my kitchen. There were suitcases by the window. Clothes scattered on the chair. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. What the hell? David and Anna froze in the doorway. Stunned. Lisa looked up casually. Like nothing was wrong. Oh, hey, Nadia. You should have knocked. Knocked. This is my apartment. Eric turned around with a sandwich in hand. Hey there. He nodded to David and Anna. Like this was perfectly normal. Anna said quietly. We came at a bad time. No. It's exactly the right time. My voice cracked. These people don't belong here. Lisa stood up. Actually, we do belong here. Mom gave us the key yesterday. We're living here while you're in Belgrade. What? The spare key you left with Mom and Dad. She gave it to us yesterday. We moved in last night. My hand started shaking. Anna gently touched my elbow. Maybe we should come back another time. No. Wait, but their faces said it all. This was too weird. Too awkward. We'll call you, David said. But I knew they wouldn't. Who would want to get involved in this drama? They left. Footsteps echoing in the hallway. I turned to Lisa and Eric. They stared at me like I was crazy. Get out. Now. We're not going anywhere. Lisa crossed her arms. Mom said we could live here. Eric nodded. Yeah. And don't worry about utilities. You're paying anyway. So. I pulled out my iPhone and called Mom. Hands shaking with rage. Lisa and Eric watched me. Mom answered on the 3rd ring. Did you really give Lisa the key to my apartment? I blurted out without saying hello. Her voice immediately became defensive. That tone she uses when she knows she's wrong but won't admit it. Lisa needs a place to live. And you've become selfish. I decided to let them move in. Maybe you'll realize how stupid you're being. Mom. That's called breaking and entering. They have no right to be here. Don't be dramatic. They're family. I don't care if they're the president and first lady. It's my apartment, and I didn't give permission. I told her about the couple who were going to rent. How they left because of this circus. How mortifying it was. Mom just kept saying I was greedy and overreacting. I hung up. Lisa gicklet. You should have seen your face when you walked in. She said to Eric. Priceless. That's it. I left the apartment. Slamming the door. I went down to the parking garage. Got in my car. And dialed 911. Police. There are trespassers in my apartment. They entered illegally and refused to leave. The dispatcher took down the address and said a unit was on the way. I'll meet them downstairs. 20 minutes later, 2 officers arrived, Officer Rodriguez and Officer Kim. While we rode up in the elevator, I briefly explained the situation. Belgrade assignment. Family demanding free housing. Mom gave them keys without permission. Lisa and Eric were still inside. Seeing the uniforms, both visibly tensed up. What's going on here? Lisa's voice wasn't so confident anymore. Officer Rodriguez stepped forward. Let me see some ID. They handed over their driver's licenses. Rodriguez examined them, then turned to me. Ma'am, do you confirm that you did not give these individuals permission to be in your apartment? I confirm it. There was no permission whatsoever. Officer Kim turned to Lisa and Eric. Do you have any documents showing you have the right to be in this apartment? A lease agreement, written permission. Lisa went pale. My mom gave us the key. She had a spare. The apartment owner is standing right here. Rodriguez nodded toward me. And she says she didn't give permission. Pack your things and leave the apartment voluntarily. That's when Lisa completely lost it. She started screaming, calling me names I won't repeat. She yelled that I was ruining her life, that I was her sister, that she'd always been jealous of me. Then she tried to lunge at me. Officer Kim grabbed her arm, stopping her from reaching me. And then Eric made the worst possible decision. Seeing the officer restraining Lisa, he shoved Kim. Get your hands off her, fatal mistake. Both officers reacted instantly. Seconds later, Eric was face down on the floor, with his hands cuffed behind his back. Lisa was screaming even louder. And when she tried to kick Rodriguez, the handcuffs snapped on her too. You're both under arrest. Rodriguez said calmly, almost matter-of-factly. Criminal trespass and assaulting a police officer. They read them their rights and explained the charges. I stood there watching as my sister and her boyfriend were led out of my apartment in handcuffs. Lisa sobbed and cursed me all the way to the elevator. After they left, I collapsed on the couch. Just sat there breathing. The apartment was eerily quiet. But traces of their brief invasion were everywhere: scattered clothes, suitcases, half-eaten sandwiches in the kitchen. I spent the next 2 hours packing their stuff. I shoved everything into suitcases without ceremony. Let them sort it out themselves. I called a TaskRabbit to pick everything up and deliver it to my parents' address. I wasn't going there myself. While waiting for pickup, I called a locksmith, got the number from the building super. Hi. This is Nadia from 3C. Apartment 304. I urgently need to change my locks today if possible. I can be there in an hour. He arrived as promised and had new locks installed in 30 minutes. Now I had brand new keys. And my parents' spare was useless metal. The whole time, my phone kept ringing. My parents calling constantly. I didn't answer. Then the text started flooding in. Mom wrote message after message calling me a terrible daughter. Selfish. Family destroyer. Monster, who had her own sister arrested. I didn't respond to any of them. Officer Rodriguez called the next morning. Ms. Petrov. This is an update. Your sister and her boyfriend spent the night in jail. Do you want to press charges for criminal trespass? I thought about it. Part of me wanted to see this through to the end. But family is still family. No. I won't press charges. What Eric did to my partner, that's between us and him. Likely a misdemeanor. Fine or community service. But definitely a stern talking to from the judge. Not my problem. And really? Not my problem. I realized time was running out. 1 week before departure, and I'd lost ideal tenants because of this circus. I called Danny, a friend who works as a realtor. Danny, I need help. Flying to Belgrade in a week. Need to rent out my apartment as soon as possible. No problem. Send me photos. I'll post on Zillow and Craigslist. I'll handle showings and paperwork. Just focus on packing. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. I spent the rest of the day photographing the apartment from the best angles and sending them to Danny with descriptions and terms. 3 days later, I was sitting on a plane to Belgrade. And 2 weeks after that, Danny called with good news. He'd found great tenants. Contract signed. Belgrade turned out to be wonderful. The work was interesting. Salary paid in euros. Beautiful city. And most importantly, every month the rent hit my Bank of America account, completely covering the mortgage payment. Danny found a wonderful couple, both teachers. Neat and responsible. No bad habits. The first month after leaving, my phone was blissfully quiet. No calls from parents. No hysterics from Lisa. Seemed like they'd written me out of their lives. And you know what? I was fine with that. Then Aunt Gloria, Dad's sister, Called. The only reasonable person in our family. Nadia, honey. How are you doing over there? Listen. I wanted to tell you about Lisa's wedding situation. Turned out, Eric's parents found out about the apartment incident. They had to get their son out of jail and pay for a lawyer. When they learned the details, they were horrified. They called your parents. My aunt told me. Said they were disgusted by the whole thing. Called Lisa spoiled and entitled. And then it got worse. Eric's parents had planned to pay for the wedding reception at a nice restaurant. They'd even put down a deposit. But after the arrest, they canceled everything. They said, if you want a wedding, pay for it yourselves. We're not rewarding this behavior. Wow. That's not all. Lisa ran to your mother, begging to move back in. Know what your mom said, what? She refused. Said she needed the rental income. What your mom suddenly realized the value of rental money. Lisa threw such a tantrum, screaming that your parents were as greedy as you. They had a huge fight. Now Lisa and Eric live in some studio apartment in the Bronx and barely talk to your parents. The whole family imploded. Lisa blames you for ruining her wedding plans. Your parents blame you for causing all this drama. And everyone's mad at everyone else. Your mother said last week, if Nadia had been a good sister, none of this would have happened. A good sister? Seriously, I told her she was talking nonsense. Nadia helped you all her life, and you treated her like a personal bank. You should be ashamed. It was nice to hear someone finally saw the truth. How are they doing financially, I asked. Terrible. Eric does gig work, sometimes Uber, sometimes food delivery. Lisa got a job at a boutique but complains constantly. Says it's unfair she has to work when she should be planning a wedding. She's never tried to find a real career. You know Lisa, she's never been motivated to work. 3 months later, Aunt Gloria called again. Eric's parents tried to reconcile. But with one condition, let him apologize to Nadia and make things right. Eric refused, saying he did nothing wrong and you went too far calling the police. His parents told him, until you take responsibility, we want nothing to do with you. So now he's cut off from his family too. Lisa's relationship with Eric was falling apart. No money. No family support. Cancelled wedding, all of it was destroying them. Last week Lisa called your mother crying, begging her to talk to you, to convince you to help somehow. And what did Mom say? She refused to call. Said you made it clear you don't care about family. She got that right. I wouldn't have answered anyway. After 6 months in Belgrade, I was thriving. The apartment generated steady rental income. The mortgage was paid like clockwork. And I was even saving money from my Euro salary. Work was exciting. I made friends among my colleagues, both locals and expats. No contact from Lisa or my parents. Exactly what I wanted. Aunt Gloria kept calling every few weeks with updates, though I'd stopped asking. I didn't care what was happening with Lisa and Eric. They made their choices, let them deal with the consequences. You know, Aunt Gloria said in one call, I'm proud of you. You were the first in the family to say no. Your parents are used to you being responsible for everyone, solving all problems. It was time to stop. I was just tired of being used. And rightfully so. You worked your butt off to get what you have. No one has the right to take that away, not family. Not strangers. Now, sitting in my Belgrade apartment looking out at the evening city lights, I don't feel an ounce of guilt. I made the right decision. My New York apartment is in good hands. The bills are paid. I'm living life on my terms. Sometimes family isn't the people you're related to by blood, but those who respect and support you. And it's better to stay away from people who only see you as a source of money and services. The property is secure. The lease is active. The mortgage is current. I'm holding my boundaries and finally breathing freely. Thanks for reading. Let me know what you think. What city are you from? How old are you? And how long have you been following these stories? Story 2. My name is Zoe. I am 35. And I never thought that one family dinner could destroy and turn my whole life upside down. That moment is forever imprinted in my memory. 23 guests at my mother-in-law's elegant table and a scalding empty plate in front of me, which became a symbol of my exile. My story began long before that fateful evening. In another world, in another life. I grew up in a loving but modest family in Buffalo, New York, in an ordinary working-class neighborhood with typical duplex houses. My parents were simple workers who invested their whole souls and all their modest savings in me to give me chances that they never had. My father, a silent and strong man with kind, tired eyes, worked as a truck driver for 30 years, disappearing for weeks on end to provide us with a decent life. My mother was a secretary at an elementary school. All the children and teachers in the neighborhood knew and loved her. Their sacrifices were invisible, but felt in everything. In a new pair of shoes for me instead of a coat for my mother, on a postponed vacation to pay for my tutors. They did everything so that I could go to college and become the first person in our family with a higher education. I felt a huge responsibility and boundless gratitude, so I studied with passion, simultaneously working part-time as a waitress. Then, as a delivery driver, took out student loans for education, and eventually received a degree in speech-language pathology with honors. By the time I met Ross, I had a successful private practice, my own small but cozy office. I worked with children with special needs, helping them find their voice and self-confidence. Seeing a child who previously could not string two words together begin to recite poetry was the highest reward for me. My work brought me great satisfaction and a stable income. I lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment, drove a practical Honda Civic, and had a small but very reliable circle of friends. My life was not glamorous, but it was authentic. Mina, built by hard work, determination, and love. Ross and I met 3 years ago at a mutual friend's wedding. He was the groom's best man. I was the bridesmaid from college. Like in a cliché romance novelle. Our eyes met across the entire reception hall. He was irresistible in his perfectly tailored suit, with intelligent, slightly mocking eyes and a disarming smile. When he asked me to dance, I felt as if the whole world around me froze. We chatted until the staff began to politely but persistently hint that the venue was closing. Ross turned out to be a financial analyst from a very wealthy Manhattan family. His father, William Ross Sr., built a huge investment firm from scratch during the volatile 80s. His mother, Patricia Hamilton Ross, came from a family of old New York elite. As she liked to emphasize, which in her understanding was synonymous with the upper class. Ross studied at a prestigious prep school, graduated from the business program at Columbia University, and moved in circles that I had only seen in the movies. Despite this gap between our worlds, we found common ground on some deeper level. He was smart, ambitious, but at the same time devoid of pretension, easy to communicate with, and made me laugh until I cried. Our romance was as fast as a summer thunderstorm. Dates in the best restaurants in Manhattan, spontaneous trips to the Hamptons, bouquets of peonies delivered to my door for no reason. He introduced me to his world, and I, blinded by love, believed that I could become a part of it. 6 months later, during a romantic trip to the beautiful Napa Valley, he proposed to me, getting down on one knee in a vineyard at sunset. Without hesitation, I said yes, sincerely believing that our love could overcome any obstacles. This was my first and main mistake. I could not imagine how deep and poisonous class prejudices could be, especially for a woman like Patricia Hamilton Ross. I first met his parents at a dinner in honor of our engagement at their estate in the Hamptons. Already on the approach to their property, I felt uncomfortable. A solid 8-foot fence, a gate with security, a perfect lawn that looked lifeless. The house itself resembled a museum rather than a living space. Enormous, cold, with marble floors and faceless designer furniture. William Ross Sr. was polite, although somewhat distant. A tall, silver-haired man who shook my hand and immediately plunged into a conversation with Ross about stock quotes. But his wife was a different story. Patricia Hamilton Ross, elegant as a porcelain figurine, in a dress that cost more than my car, measured me with an icy, appraising look. Her smile never touched her eyes for a second. She spent the entire dinner interrogating me. disguised as small talk. Zoe. What an interesting, simple name. You're not from Manhattan. Are you? Buffalo. Yes. I've heard. It's a major industrial city. And what do your parents do? If it's not a secret, truck drivers. What kind of man's profession? And my mother is a secretary at school. How quaint. Each of my answers seemed to confirm her worst fears. She mentioned Ross's ex-girlfriend Isabella several times with studied casualness. Isabella was very knowledgeable about art. We could talk for hours about contemporary painting. Her family has a wonderful estate in Martha's Vineyard. Her father is a renowned surgeon, the chief of staff at one of the best hospitals in Manhattan. They were such a harmonious couple. What a pity it didn't work out. Ross seemed deaf and blind. He adored his mother and took her caustic remarks at face value, as ordinary small talk. On the way home, when I plucked up the courage to tell him how humiliating I felt, he just waved me off. Darling, you're exaggerating. Mom is just old school. She is straightforward. She cares about me. That's all. Give her time. She will definitely love you. But time, unfortunately, did not change anything, but only worsened the situation. I tried everything to win my mother-in-law's favor. I brought thoughtful gifts, which she accepted with a cold smile and immediately put away somewhere in the far closet. I read books on topics that interested her to keep the conversation going, but she would interrupt me mid-sentence to turn to someone else. The only person who showed me genuine kindness was my Aunt Teresa, my mother's sister, who lived in Westchester County. She was my anchor and the only witness to how I was systematically and coldly erased from the family. When the invitation to the annual family dinner in honor of William Ross Sr. II's retirement arrived, I greeted it with a mixture of hope and fear. This is a very important evening, Ross told me. Mom had been planning it for months. The whole family would be there. I nodded, choosing the most discreet and expensive dress in my wardrobe, secretly hoping that this time it would be different. If only I knew how this evening would turn out, and that it would not just be the end, but the beginning of something completely new. The evening of William Ross Sr. II's retirement celebration turned out to be cool and clear, like October. As our BMW pulled into the circular driveway in front of their mansion, joining a line of other luxury cars, I momentarily caught my breath. The house, illuminated by professional lighting, resembled a picture from Architectural Digest. The immaculate lawns, the stone facade, everything spoke of wealth and status. You look great, Ross said, squeezing my hand before we left. I spent hours getting ready. That same black dress I had saved up for 3 months. Professional hairstyling. Makeup designed to look elegant, but not provocative. Patricia Hamilton Ross herself met us. Ignoring the hired staff, she gave Ross a warm hug, exclaiming how handsome he looked in his tuxedo. Then, turning to me, her smile noticeably cooled. She gave me a quick air kiss, trying not to let it touch my skin. Zoe, you finally came, she said, as if my presence was in serious question. And without saying a word about my appearance, she turned away to greet the next guests. The grand foyer opened into several elegantly furnished rooms, where about 40 people had already gathered. The warm light of the crystal chandeliers was reflected in the champagne glasses that the waiters were carrying, and in the corner of the living room, a string quartet was playing softly, performing something by Mozart. I recognized many faces: William Ross Sr., his brother and his wife, Ross's cousins, several partners from his firm. As Ross led me through the halls, stopping to greet relatives, I noticed that all the tables and walls were decorated with family photographs, professional portraits of children, vacation photos, photos from various social events. I looked around, but couldn't find a single photo from our wedding. Although recent photos of Christopher with Marina and Allison with her husband were in the most prominent places. Ross, come here, son, his father called from across the room. Ross squeezed my hand apologetically and headed toward his father and several older men. Left alone, I approached the dining room doors. Admiring the intricate table setting, the long mahogany table was set for 23 people, the finest china, crystal, and silver, arranged with mathematical precision. Elegant place cards indicated each guest's place. Impressive, isn't it? I heard a familiar voice behind me. I turned around and saw Aunt Teresa, elegant in a dark blue dress. Aunt. I hugged her, feeling a huge sense of relief. While we were chatting, a waiter approached us with a tray of champagne. He offered a glass to Aunt, but then moved past me. I had to call out to him. Can I have some too? Please. He looked embarrassed for a moment. Nodded. And let me take the glass. As he was leaving, I noticed Patricia Hamilton Ross watching us from across the room. Her lips were pressed into a thin line. Don't let her get to you, my aunt whispered. That's exactly what she wants. Over the next hour, I noticed similar minor humiliations. Waiters constantly gave me a wide berth with appetizers. When Allison was bragging about her new diamond bracelet, Patricia Hamilton Ross loudly remarked that it was precisely such things that spoke of good taste and class. Casting a meaningful glance at my modest jewelry, the most obvious jab occurred when my mother-in-law herself walked around the room. Pouring wine for the guests, she refilled everyone's glass. Exchanging a few phrases, coming up to us, she refilled my aunt's glass, asking her about her recent trip to Europe. And then, without even deigning to look at me, turned around to leave. At that moment, she accidentally touched my elbow, and red wine splashed on my black dress. Oh, what a nuisance, she said, without a trace of regret. You should go to the powder room and tidy yourself up. In the bathroom, dabbing at the stain with a damp cloth, I could hardly hold back my tears. Through the ventilation, I heard voices from the next room, which was probably a study. She tries so hard that it's almost pitiful, said Patricia Hamilton Ross's voice. This dress is clearly from Macy's. Mom! Stop it, answered Allison's laughing voice. Ross is happy. For now. Patricia Hamilton Ross snapped. By the way, Isabella called last week. Can you imagine? She's still single. I always knew they'd get back together. I froze, pressing the napkin to my dress. When I returned, Ross was already absorbed in conversation with his father. He barely noticed my return. Finally, Patricia Hamilton Ross announced that dinner was served. The guests headed to the dining room in search of their seats. I looked through each elegantly written place card, but my name was nowhere to be found. Ross, I whispered. My card is missing. He looked surprised, then shrugged. Probably just overlooked it. Sit here between me and Aunt Teresa. He casually pulled up an extra chair, ruining the perfect symmetry of the table setting. There was no place setting. No glasses. Nothing. Patricia Hamilton Ross noticed it instantly. Ross. We had a very precise seating arrangement, she said in a tense voice. It's okay. Mom. Zoe will sit here. Once everyone was seated, dinner began. The dining room glowed in the light of dozens of candles. The waiters moved with ballet-like precision. The first course served was a delicate lobster bisque. Porcelain bowls were placed in front of each guest except me. I sat awkwardly while everyone else ate. Ross, engrossed in conversation with his brother, did not notice it at once. But Aunt Teresa did. Excuse me, she said to the waiter. My niece did not receive the first course. The waiter looked sheepishly towards Patricia Hamilton Ross, who said with an unperturbed smile, I believe we are one portion short. The chef prepared exactly as much as there were invited guests. Zoe, maybe you could share a portion with Ross. The hint was crystal clear. Ross finally paid attention to what was happening. Mom, can't you ask the kitchen to make some more? This bisque is a very complicated dish. Dear, I'm sure Zoe understands everything. He hesitated, then simply moved his bowl a little closer to me. Eat with me. Second course. Pan-seared scallops. The same pattern repeated. Everyone got their portion. Except me. This time I didn't even say anything. Ross absent-mindedly offered me one of his scallops, continuing to discuss something with his cousin. By the third course, the palate cleanser. I could already feel the sympathetic and puzzled glances of some of the guests. Then came the climax. The waiters brought in the main course, sizzling filet mignon steaks. Perfectly cooked. Garnished with truffle butter. The aroma filled the room. Plates were placed in front of each guest until it was my turn. Instead of the steak that everyone else had gotten, a small plate with a few lettuce leaves was placed in front of me. No dressing. Just green leaves. The contrast was so glaring that the room went silent. Aunt Teresa put her fork down with a sharp clink. Patricia. Why is Zoe having lettuce when everyone else is eating steak? She asked loudly. All conversation at the table ceased. Patricia Hamilton rose, without changing her honeyed smile, answered in a voice full of venom. I ordered only for the family. The steaks are very expensive. They were flown in, specially. I am sure Zoe will appreciate something lighter. After her words, such silence reigned at the table that it seemed you could hear the candle wicks burning out. 20 pairs of eyes stared at me, waiting for my reaction. Ross was next to me, my husband. Without raising his head, continued cutting his steak as if nothing had happened. Am I your family or not? I asked him quietly. He gave me a pained look. Zoe. No. Not here, he muttered, continuing to chew. At that moment, something inside me broke. 2 years of humiliation. Petty jabs. Pretending not to notice. It all came crashing down on me at once. I tolerated Patricia Hamilton Ross's passive-aggressive behavior for the sake of Ross, believing that one day she would accept me. But sitting there with a plate of empty lettuce leaves, while everyone else was enjoying premium meat, I realized that nothing would change unless I changed it myself. When dessert came, fluffy chocolate, soufflés in little ramekins, I again received nothing. Not even a cookie or a mint. Just an empty space where my dessert should have been. I watched everyone at the table enjoying it, praising the menu. Ross was so absorbed in his soufflé that he didn't even offer me a taste. He didn't even seem to notice that I was sitting next to him with empty hands. My palms trembled slightly as I gathered my courage. Aunt Teresa, sitting on the other side, sensed my determination and squeezed my hand encouragingly under the table. This silent gesture of support was the final push. For 2 years, I tried to fit into a family that had no intention of accepting me. For 2 years, I cowered, kept silent, swallowed insults, pretending not to notice the thousands of cuts on my soul. Looking at these people laughing, enjoying their dinner, I realized that this moment would determine our entire future. I could have kept silent and forever come to terms with my role as an outsider. Or I could finally stand up for myself. No matter the consequences, I chose the latter. You know, I said, and my voice sounded surprisingly firm. Despite my wildly pounding heart, I would like to clarify something. The conversations at the table gradually died down. Ross froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. Zoe. Not now, he hissed. But I continued, my gaze fixed on Patricia Hamilton Ross at the head of the table. For 2 years I had tried my best to become part of this family. I had turned a blind eye to barbs, forgiven occasional misunderstandings, and put up with being treated as a second-class citizen. But tonight had made clear something I could no longer ignore. My mother-in-law's smile froze, though her knuckles turned white as she clenched her spoon. I don't know what you mean, dear. This is hardly the time for your imaginary grievances. Imaginary, I repeated. Then, let me be specific. Today I was the only person for whom there was no place card. The only one the waiters consistently passed over for drinks and appetizers. I got an empty salad while everyone else was eating steak. And now no dessert. I glanced around the table, meeting the eyes of each family member. Some looked away awkwardly. Others looked surprised, as if they hadn't noticed until I pointed it out. But it wasn't just about tonight. It's about that Christmas gift exchange where everyone got something but me. Because I wasn't on the family list. It's about those vacation photos where I was asked to step aside for a family-only photo. And it's about our wedding photo being the only one not on your wall of family portraits. William Ross Sr. frowned, looking genuinely puzzled. Patricia. Is this true? Before she could answer, Aunt Teresa intervened. It's all true. William. I myself have witnessed it more than once. This is ridiculous. Patricia Hamilton Ross raised her voice. Zoe has always been too sensitive. We did nothing but welcome her into our home. Welcomed me, I echoed. You have systematically excluded me from day one. You compare me unfavorably to Isabella at every opportunity. You forget to include me in family newsletters. You belittle my career, my background, everything connected with me. And then Ross finally showed up. Zoe, you are embarrassing yourself and my family. This is my father's retirement dinner. His words hit harder than anything his mother had done. Your family, I repeated. So after 2 years of marriage, you still don't think I'm part of it. That's not what I meant. He backtracked, looking around at the uncomfortable faces of his relatives. That's not it. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. 3 weeks ago, you and your mom were exchanging text messages about me. Do you want me to read them to everyone? Ross's face turned pale. You were going through my phone, I didn't have to. You left it on the nightstand when you went to take a shower. A notification from your mom caught my attention. I took a screenshot. Your mom wrote, and I quote, Zoe looked completely out of place at the museum gala. Couldn't you at least help her choose an appropriate outfit? Isabella always understood how to dress for such events. And you replied, I know. Mom, sometimes I wonder if she will ever be able to fit into our circle. There was rustling and whispering around the table. You never protected me, I said. And my voice finally wavered. Not once in 2 years have you stood up to your mother when she humiliated me. How dare you, Patricia Hamilton Ross whispered, finally throwing off the mask of good manners. Ross gave you a life you could not even dream of. Nobody from nowhere. And here is your gratitude. Mom Allison exclaimed. William Ross Sr. stood up, dropping his napkin. Patricia. That's enough. No. It's not enough. Her carefully constructed image was crumbling before our eyes. She was never worthy of our son. And everyone in this room knew it. I was the only one with the courage to admit it. Ross looked confused. His gaze darted between me and his mother. Mom. Please stop. Choose. Ross. She demanded. Right now. Your family or her. The silence that followed her ultimatum was absolute. I held my breath. Part of me still hoped he would choose me. Ross swallowed hard. Looked at his mother. At me. Then at his half-eaten soufflé. His silence spoke louder than any words. I stood up slowly, placing my napkin next to my empty plate. Thank you for making it so clear. Both of you. I will not stay where I am not wanted or respected. Dignity is all I have left. And I clung to it as I walked out of the dining room. No one called out to me. No one followed me. Not even Ross. In the foyer, I picked up my coat and walked out into the cold October night. Tears were coming. But I wasn't going to cry on her territory. I had already reached my car when I heard footsteps behind me. Zoe. Wait. It was Aunt Teresa. Not Ross. I need to go, I said, struggling with the keys. I know, honey. But don't get behind the wheel in such a state. Let me drive you. I can handle it. I insisted. Although my hands were shaking, then I'll follow you to make sure you get there safely, my aunt said firmly. And Zoe, I'm proud of you. What you did took a lot of courage. As I pulled away from the mansion, I glanced in the rearview mirror. My aunt's headlights followed me confidently. But there was no sign of my husband in the driveway. He hadn't chosen his wife. That said it all. I reached our home. In the elevator, I leaned against the wall, suddenly feeling an overwhelming fatigue. Entering our apartment, I felt a deafening silence. The photos of Ross and me being so happy seemed to mock me from the walls. Our wedding portrait, the one that had no place at his parents', hung above the fireplace. Only after I locked the door behind me did I finally allow myself to cry. I slid down the door to the floor and sobbed until I was hoarse. Until my eyes began to burn, releasing all the pain, humiliation, and betrayal that had been accumulating inside me for 2 long years. I spent the whole night on Aunt Teresa's couch, going from tears to complete numbness. The next morning, when she silently placed a cup of hot coffee in front of me, I felt completely broken. My phone was ringing off the hook with calls and messages from Ross, but I didn't answer. When I finally decided to listen to the voicemails, I didn't hear a drop of remorse in them, only anger and irritation. How could you humiliate my family like that? On a night like this, you should immediately call my mother and apologize. The unfairness of his demands brought on a new wave of tears. In what universe was I the one who had to apologize? Towards midnight, I heard his key turn in the lock. I had already moved into the bedroom and was sitting on the bed next to my half-packed suitcase. "What are you doing?" he demanded when he saw the suitcase. "I'm packing my things. I'm going to stay with my aunt. Don't make such a big deal out of it," he snorted. "Running away won't solve anything." "I'm not running away. I'm leaving a situation where I'm not appreciated or respected." He paced the room, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "You humiliated my mother in front of the whole family." "What did you expect?" "What did I expect?" I repeated with a bitter smile. "I expected my husband to stand up for me when his mother was deliberately insulting me. I expected basic human decency." "You're exaggerating." "As usual," he said dismissively. "If only you'd just talk to me quietly after dinner instead of making a scene. All those times I've quietly talked to you about your mother's behavior. Has it made any difference?" He sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Dad is retiring. The company is transitioning. Mom has always done things her way. Her way of humiliating and excluding your wife." I asked in an even voice. "She is just having a hard time adjusting to changes in the family. If only you tried harder to fit in." These words were the last straw for me. Tried harder. I have been doing nothing but trying for 2 years. I changed the way I dressed, the way I spoke, the things I talked about. I attended every family gathering, donated to charities I couldn't afford. What else could I do? Apologize to my mother? For starters, I zipped up my suitcase with finality. I won't apologize for finally standing up for myself. When I started for the door, Ross blocked my way. "If you leave now, you'll be choosing this conflict over our marriage." "No. Ross, you already made that choice when you stayed silent while your mother treated me like trash. When you texted her that I didn't fit in. When you demanded that I apologize instead of acknowledging my pain." I walked around him, but his next words made me freeze. "She had warned me. Mom had said that you would never truly fit into our world. You know, she had warned me. Too. In her own way." I turned to him one last time. "She had lied when she had said that you and Isabella had broken up because she hadn't been supportive enough of your career. You broke up because she was tired of your mother and the fact that you couldn't stand up to her." "Right." The scared look on Ross's face confirmed my guess. "Goodbye, Ross," I said quietly and left. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur. I lived with my aunt. Ross called, wrote messages through WhatsApp and Facebook. His mood changed, from angry demands to come back to vague apologies that never acknowledged the problem. And then unexpected things started happening. Christopher, his brother, called me through FaceTime. "Zoe, I want you to know that Marina and I support you," he said awkwardly. What happened at dinner was wrong. Mom had always been difficult, but this was too much. Later, Marina wrote to me on Instagram when we first got married. "Patricia treated me similarly. Not as cruelly, but the same pattern. It took me years and working at my father-in-law's firm for her to accept me. Just know that you are not crazy." What she did was cruel. But the most surprising thing was the call from William Ross Sr. "Zoe, this is William. he said formally. I want to apologize for what happened in our home. I should have been more observant. I consider you part of the family, no matter how badly it was demonstrated. While I was trying to digest all of this, Ross went on the offensive. He sent me an ultimatum through email. Either I go back and make peace with his mother, or we need to reconsider our marriage. That same day, I received a registered letter from Patricia Hamilton Ross's lawyer with a complex accusation that I stole and did not return some jewelry. It was a brazen attempt to intimidate me. In the evening, I called my friend, and after listening to everything, she said, Zoe, what you are describing is a toxic family system. You need to consult a divorce lawyer. Just to know your rights. The word divorce hit like a slap in the face. But she was right. A few days after the consultation, which gave me strength, Ross called. His voice was quiet and depressed. He asked to meet on neutral territory. I agreed. We met in a Starbucks. He looked like he had aged 10 years. Tired and haggard. I have to apologize, he began. What happened was inappropriate. Inappropriate, I raised an eyebrow. Your mother humiliated me. And you remained silent, and then demanded that I apologize. He sighed heavily. I know I was wrong. After you left, Father made a scene. He told my mother that what she did was cruel and mean. He said that he had let her manipulate our family for years, and that he was ashamed of her and of me. And then he pulled me aside and said something I can't stop thinking about. I couldn't protect your mother from the worst of her nature. And now you can't protect your wife. Don't make the same mistakes I did. Son. I was silent. Stunned. And then he showed me a photo. Ross continued, taking out his phone. On the screen was an old photo of a young William Ross Sr. dancing with my Aunt Teresa. They met in college. He was going to propose to her. But his parents were against it. She was from a working-class family. He had to leave her and marry my mother, a girl from the right social circle. He said he regretted it all his life. And at that moment, I saw myself in the mirror, repeating his mistake. I realized that the thought of a life full of regrets terrified me. What do you mean? Ross, I mean that I was wrong about everything. About the way I allowed my mother to treat you. For not protecting you. For putting her comfort above our happiness. I don't want to lose you. Zoe, these past few weeks have been the worst of my life. I'm asking you to give me a chance. I've already made an appointment for us to see a marriage counselor. And I told my mother that if she wants me in her life, she has to respect you and our marriage. If she can't, we'll limit our contact with her. I was still hesitant. But for the first time in a long time, I saw determination in his eyes. Not weakness. Okay. I agreed cautiously. 1 session. Let's start with that. The relief on his face was almost palpable. The next 6 months were filled with difficult conversations and slow changes. Ross kept his word. In therapy, he spoke honestly about his childhood, about how he was taught to put his mother's happiness above all else. He learned to set boundaries. We insisted on family therapy. Patricia Hamilton Ross resisted at first. But under pressure from her husband and fear of losing her son, she agreed. Gradually, session after session, the ice began to melt. She was reluctant to talk about her cold childhood, about how she had been taught that appearances were most important. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it helped explain it. At William Ross Sr.'s birthday party, 6 months later, I felt at peace in their home for the first time. My place at the table was set, and our wedding photo hung on the wall in the living room. The changes weren't magical. They were hard-won. But the biggest change was the 2 lines on the pregnancy test. When we told the parents the news, Patricia Hamilton Ross's first reaction was, "A grandchild. We need to immediately prepare the nursery in the guest room." But before I could tense up, Ross said softly but firmly, "Mom, we appreciate your concern. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll decide everything together, step by step." And she, although pressing her lips together, nodded. At that moment I realized that we had a future. Our family will never be perfect, but it will be a family where everyone has a voice and a place at the table. The empty plate, once a symbol of my exile, eventually led me to a fuller, more authentic life than I could have imagined. I found not only my place, but my voice, and that turned out to be my most valuable acquisition. Story 3. I am 28 years old, and I have an older sister named Stella, whom I, dare I say it, hate. It is because of her, because of this long-standing, soul-deepening food, that I am writing these lines now, trying to understand whether I had the right to act the way I did. Stella was an unplanned child. My mother became pregnant with her when she and my father were still college students, young and confused. As a result, Stella spent the first 2 years of her life mostly at our grandparents' farm outside Albany with our grandparents, who took on the main care of their granddaughter. Her parents, torn between classes and finals, visited her as often as they could. But these were only short visits, full of haste and a sense of guilt. When they finally graduated and got married, Stella moved into their apartment in Rochester. I think it was those first years away from her parents that made her who she was, desperately clinging to their attention, painfully jealous, and unable to share their love with anyone. For 3 years, she was the only son in their universe, until my mother got pregnant with me. From the moment I was born, Stella hated me. My earliest fragmentary memories are of her hands roughly pushing me away when I was still a tiny thing trying to crawl to her, or her fingers squeezing my hair so hard that I, and our cats, began to cry loudly from the pain. My parents tried to console me, saying that it was normal childhood jealousy, that older siblings need time to get used to it. But Stella did not get used to it. It only got worse over the years. She would yell at me all the time, anytime I would even try to talk to her. More than once, she would lock me in my room so I couldn't go to my parents, and I would pound on the door with my little fists and cry until one of them came and let me out. Sometimes, if my presence really irritated her, she would just hit me. As a child, I didn't realize there was a real, serious problem between us. My parents never made a tragedy out of it, blaming it on Stella's difficult character. I kept hoping that one day she would grow up and love me. My opinion of her changed dramatically the day she invited me to play ball in our backyard. I was about 7 years old. Dad was at work, and Mom was lying down to rest. Stella was taller and stronger, but instead of playing fair, she started throwing a heavy rubber ball right at my face with a kind of evil grin. I asked her to stop many times, begged her, but she just laughed and continued. In the end, the ball hit me so hard that I felt warm, sticky blood from my nose running down my face. The pain was sharp. Tears were in my eyes, but I held back. I afraid to show her my weakness. When I tried to go back into the house covered in blood, Stella caught up with me and grabbed my hand. She made me swear that I would not tell my parents the truth, and made up a story that I tripped and fell myself. Despite the pain and humiliation, she did not let me see my mother until I agreed to her conditions. I lied. But luckily, Dad had Ring security cameras all around the house, and he checked the footage that evening. My parents were shocked to see Stella throwing the ball at me over and over again with obvious pleasure. Dad yelled at her, and Mom, as always, tried to defend her, saying that maybe it was a one-off, and gently tried to find out why Stella did it. Stella was angry that the truth had come out, and she glared at me during the conversation. She insisted on her innocence, and my parents eventually hushed it up, hoping that she would change. But I knew that now she would blame me for everything. That's when her bullying moved to a new, more sophisticated level. She began deliberately trying to pinch my fingers in the car door, pushed me in the school hallways when there were no teachers around. If I was sitting with my friends during recess, she would come up to me and loudly tell them what a snitch and traitor I was, who was not worth hanging out with. She would even steal my lunch money so I would go hungry. I tried to complain to my mother, and she tried to deal with Stella's behavior through gentle discipline and long conversations. But it did not lead to anything. When I turned 10, I convinced my parents to throw me an anime-themed birthday party. I begged them for months. And to my delight, they agreed. Stella had been teasing me the whole time, calling me a tomboy and laughing at me for not having anyone come to my stupid party. But to her and my surprise, it turned out the opposite. I invited my classmates. And when word of the party spread to other kids who also liked anime, they happily accepted. On the day of the party, our house was filled with cheerful children dressed as their favorite characters. The party was a real success. And my parents, who had previously considered me withdrawn and shy due to constant bullying from Stella, I were amazed to see how confidently and easily I communicated with my peers. Stella sat in the corner all evening with her lips pouting and even refused to sing happy birthday along with everyone else when it was time to cut the cake. To be honest, I didn't care. Because for the first time in my life, I was the center of attention. And for the first time I realized that the world did not revolve around Stella and that I could be happy without her approval. Gradually, as I grew older, I became more confident and learned to fight back. I no longer kept quiet. Every time she tried to put me down or make a snarky comment about my appearance, I responded in kind, calmly, directly, and usually much wittier. I began to tease her myself, ironically criticizing her tasteless clothes or superficial judgments, knowing that my father was behind me and would no longer turn a blind eye to her behavior. I always reported her antics to him when necessary. Unlike my mother, my father was strict with Stella and always demanded responsibility from her. She began to hate me even more. But she realized that I was no longer a helpless victim and would not allow myself to be pushed around. When Stella graduated from high school, she had no prospects. Her GPA was weak. She had no interests. She told her parents that she wanted to take a gap year to find herself, which caused a lot of controversy. Her parents insisted that she first get a college degree. Her dad even promised that she would be able to travel during winter and spring breaks if she went to college. But Stella was adamant. Her parents reluctantly agreed. However, this gap year stretched into several years. The first year, they paid for all her travel, and she traveled around Europe with a backpack, having fun, posting hundreds of photos on Instagram. When the year was over, Dad tried to talk to her about college again, but Stella just stopped contacting him. Then he said that from now on she would be on her own and would never get a penny again. At some point, Stella said she wanted to become a digital nomad, but nothing came of it. Every remote job required at least basic skills. With no other options, she reluctantly switched to volunteering with organizations like AmeriCorps, which provided her with a roof over her head and meager food. Her parents could not hide their disappointment, but they did not interfere. What upset them was that Stella constantly called her mother and complained about how hard her life was, without doing anything to change it. Unlike her, I studied well. Mathematics and physics came easy to me. Even before graduation, I received an invitation to my dream university, the computer science program at MIT. And even with a partial scholarship, my parents were delighted, and my relatives began to persuade them to throw a party in my honor. I think Stella didn't like this decision. She kept calling her mother and complaining that my parents treated me better, that they were throwing a party to spite her, to humiliate her. My mother, who missed her eldest daughter, persuaded her to come. Stella reluctantly agreed. She showed up a few days before the party and didn't even say hello to me. On the day of the celebration, my grandparents and aunts and uncles all came with gifts and were sincerely happy for me. But I couldn't help but notice how much Stella drank. She poured herself glass after glass of wine. Dad got worried and tried to stop her, but she just snatched the glass from him in irritation. Later, our grandfather clinked his fork against the glass, calling for silence. He wanted to make a toast. He started by saying that he was proud of both of us and that he was glad to see us doing what made us happy. He congratulated me on my scholarship and added that he couldn't wait to visit me in Boston. Stella snorted loudly at this. Grandpa hesitated. The parents exchanged awkward glances as Stella began to giggle, and then loudly declared that no one believed his words about being proud of both of us. Since everyone had only come here for the golden child, my cheeks flushed with shame. She continued to complain loudly that everyone had come with gifts for me. But no one had helped her with money, so she could visit more countries. She even said that it was a waste of time for her parents to have a second child if they couldn't even take care of one. At that moment, my grandfather, usually a gentle and quiet man, raised his voice for the first time in my memory. He reminded her of what her parents had gone through when they brought her in as college students. He scolded her for turning a happy occasion into an ugly farce, and said that if she was jealous of her sister, it was her own problem. Stella, shocked, ran away from the party in tears. Her mother followed her. Stella never apologized later. Soon I moved to the MIT dorms. Stella stayed with her parents without plans for the future, disappearing at night with dubious company. One night I was woken up by a panicked call from my parents. They were in the hospital. It turned out that Stella, drunk driving, crashed into someone's fence. Fortunately, no one was hurt. But Dad had to pay for all the damage. The insurance company refused to pay. Dad was furious. He gave Stella an ultimatum. Either she goes to a therapist, finds a job, or gets out of his house. Stella started screaming that he has no right to control her. In short, Dad kicked her out of the house as soon as she was discharged. She tried to find shelter with relatives, but knowing all about her antics, they refused. Surprisingly, a few days later she called me and asked for money. I had savings of about $1, 650, which I earned by tutoring in high school. And despite everything, I decided to help her. I could not bear the thought of my sister sleeping on the street. I transferred every last penny to her through Venmo, hoping she would make a sensible decision. As expected, she spent it on drinking and hanging out with friends. I saw her Instagram stories and tried to message her, hoping to have a mature conversation, but she simply blocked me. At that moment, I realized that enough was enough. If she wants to continue acting like an irresponsible child, I can't help her anymore. For the next 3 years, almost nothing was heard from her. In my senior year of college, when I had almost forgotten about her existence, I unexpectedly received a call from Stella. After so many years of deafening silence, I hesitated before answering. But eventually, I picked up the phone. Suddenly, something serious happened. However, Stella's voice sounded strangely enthusiastic and carefree. She asked cheerfully, "How am I doing? What am I doing?" The most annoying thing about talking to her is how easily she steps over years of resentment, as if nothing had happened. I awkwardly reminded her that she had blocked me several years ago. But Stella just waved it off, saying that she forgave me for my mistakes and wanted to start everything from scratch. I have no idea what mistakes I made that she forgave me for. But before I could ask her anything, she blurted out that she had met someone a year ago. I asked who he was, and she began to enthusiastically tell me how amazing he was and that she wanted me to meet him. She asked if I was free on the weekend to come to Albany for a family dinner. Knowing that Stella couldn't be trusted, I said I wasn't sure, but she kept trying, coaxing and telling me it wouldn't be a real family dinner without me. She also talked to her parents, and they were surprised at how happy she sounded. You could tell we were all intrigued. So I decided to take the Greyhound bus home on Friday night. At dinner, Stella introduced us to her new boyfriend, Kyle. They really did look happy. Stella told us that she worked for a large marketing company and was well paid. That was where she met Kyle. There was clearly chemistry between them. And to my surprise, I was genuinely happy for my sister. However, the situation changed dramatically when Kyle, a nice and open guy, began to admire Stella's intelligence, saying how lucky he was to meet such a successful woman. After all, she's a graduate of MIT. Imagine, he proudly told our parents. I never got a chance to study at such a prestigious university. He continued to tell how Stella always shared with him memories of her student life, about professors, about defending her thesis. My parents and I looked at each other, our smiles frozen on our faces. We didn't understand at all why he thought Stella graduated from MIT if she didn't have a college education at all. Stella avoided our gaze and quickly changed the subject. The rest of the dinner passed in tense silence. After dinner, Stella and Kyle quickly left. It was clear that something was fishy. Later, she called her parents, begging them not to tell Kyle the truth. Dad began to insist on details. That's how we learned that Stella had forged her MIT diploma to get this job. We were furious at how serious and thoughtful her lie was. She also admitted that she had hidden other important things from Kyle, including the accident she had gotten into while drunk, and that she used to drink every day, and that her father kicked her out of the house. Her parents told her that this was fundamentally wrong. If she really loved Kyle, she had to tell him the truth. But Stella refused, told us not to interfere, and was sure that Kyle would never find out. I didn't want to be part of this drama, and decided to remain silent. Only 3 months had passed when Stella called me and said that she and Kyle were engaged. I asked if it was too hasty, but she just laughed, saying that I just didn't understand anything about true love. I congratulated her. She told me that she wanted to have a cozy wedding and that she already had several ideas. And then she said that I, as her sister, you should take charge of organizing the wedding because she, the bride, does not want to be nervous and tense. I was taken aback and asked if this meant that she wanted me to be her maid of honor. Stella replied that she had already asked her colleague for this role. I asked, what about the other bridesmaids? But she said that these places were already taken by her new friends from work. She added that the role of the wedding planner is the most important at the wedding and that she trusted me with it as a sister. I was truly offended. She had not just left me out of the wedding ceremony. She had decided that I should do all the dirty work. And for free. I told her that I thought her colleagues, who knew her much better, would be better suited for this task. Stella countered that all her colleagues had families and jobs and couldn't spend their free time on that. Then she said that since I was still studying at university and apparently not as busy as they were, I should be grateful that she trusted me with such an important responsibility. Her impudence made me laugh. She reminded me once again how manipulative and selfish she could be. I firmly refused, saying that this was my last year of school. I had my thesis and final exams, and she should find a professional planner. This seemed to infuriate Stella. She started shouting that she had counted on me as a family member and that I had to contribute to her wedding. I replied that I wouldn't mind helping with a little bit, but I couldn't take on that much work. My refusal became a huge problem for her. She immediately called her parents to pressure me. She claimed that it was shameful for a bride to do everything herself. My parents tried to find a compromise and suggested that she at least pay me for the work, because organizing a wedding is a lot of work. But Stella flatly refused. She said that no normal sister would take money for such nonsense and that I was just selfish. She started sending me angry texts, but I did not answer. My parents also decided not to interfere anymore and supported my decision. I was right to refuse to fulfill her absurd demands. I decided I had had enough of her drama, but I didn't know yet that the main act of this drama was still ahead. I thought about this whole situation. Hundreds of messages from strangers on Reddit strengthened my decision. People from all over the country wrote that I had to tell Kyle the truth, to protect him from a life built on deception. And I agreed with them. It was no longer just a matter of personal resentment. It was a matter of decency towards a good, unsuspecting person. If I were him, I would definitely want to know that my partner was a skilled liar. I decided that I would not write to him on Facebook. It would be weird and frivolous. Instead, I sat down at the table and wrote a letter. I chose my words carefully, trying to be as objective and impartial as possible. I didn't write about my childhood pain or grievances. I simply laid out the cold facts: Stella's lack of a diploma, her falsification of documents to apply for a job, the drunk driving accident that led to her father kicking her out of the house, and how she spent my last savings and then blocked me. I ended the letter with the words, "You have the right to know the truth before you tie your life to my sister. What to do with this information is up to you. My only request is that you not tell her who told you this." I folded the sheet of paper in 4 and put it in my pocket. It was my one-way ticket out of this drama. The engagement party was taking place in a posh rented venue in the Catskills, when I finally arrived, exhausted and hungry after a 6-hour ride on a Greyhound bus from Boston. The party was in full swing. Through the large windows, I could see people in their finery laughing, hear music and the clink of glasses. The contrast between their carefree gaiety and my own state was striking. Stella met me at the entrance. She looked me up and down with an icy, assessing look and, instead of greeting me, said through gritted teeth, "Finally. You're late." She snatched my bag from me, casually threw it into the corner, and, grabbing my elbow, dragged me into the backyard. "Listen carefully," she said icily. "A couple of servers didn't show up for work. We're short-handed. You promised to help. Here you go. You'll be serving drinks." Without even letting me wash up or say hello to my parents, she pushed me into a group of real servers in uniform and thrust a heavy tray of champagne glasses into my hands. At that moment, I felt a stab of humiliation, so sharp that it took my breath away. She did it on purpose, in front of all her new successful friends and, most importantly, in front of our parents. I saw them, confused and pained faces in the crowd. My father clenched his fists, and my mother had tears in her eyes. I just nodded slightly, letting them know that everything was okay. And in that moment, humiliation gave way to cold, clear determination. Stella herself had given me the perfect weapon and the perfect cover. I put on a mask of polite detachment and began to work. I moved between the guests. My back was straight, my movements precise. I was not a server. I was a soldier on a mission. I chose the moment when Stella was laughing loudly at the other end of the room, accepting congratulations from her boss. Kyle stood alone by the column, thoughtfully looking into his glass. I approached him. "More champagne?" I asked in an even voice. He looked up at me and smiled in surprise. "Aglaia, what are you doing here? You don't have to do this." "I'm just helping," I answered, handing him the glass. I discreetly, covering it with my palm, put a folded note into his hand. Our fingers touched for a moment. "Please read this when you have a chance," I whispered so quietly that no one but him could hear. "This is very, very important." He looked at me with surprise, but understanding, nodded and put the note in his jacket pocket. I walked away silently. No more than 15 minutes passed. The door leading into the house suddenly opened, and Kyle came out onto the terrace. His face was white as a sheet, and his eyes were dark. He walked purposefully through the crowd, which involuntarily parted for him, and came straight to Stella. "Stella," he said loudly and clearly. The music died down. All conversation ceased. "We need to talk right now." Stella looked at him in surprise. "Darling, what happened? I want to ask you a question, and I want you to answer it honestly." Looking me in the eye, his voice rang with suppressed anger. "Did you ever study at MIT?" In the silence that followed, one of the guests could be heard gasping. Stella's eyes widened in pure animal terror. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "I'm waiting." Kyle pressed. He glanced at my parents. "It's true, isn't it?" My father, after a long, heavy pause, looked straight at Stella, and in his gaze was all the bitterness of a father's disappointment. "No, Kyle," he said firmly. "It's not true." A collective sigh swept through the crowd. Kyle turned back to Stella, who had begun to tremble. "How could you?" he asked, no longer holding back the trembling in his voice. "You lied. Our whole life. Everything you told me. It was all a lie." The party had turned into a nightmare. Kyle, saying that he needed to leave immediately, turned around and left without looking back. His parents followed him, casting contemptuous glances at the table. The guests, including her boss, who looked at her with icy condemnation, began to disperse quickly, avoiding her gaze. 10 minutes later, only we remained on the terrace, me, my parents, and Stella. standing alone in the midst of the destruction of her false life. She suspected it was me, but she had no proof. A week later, Kyle finally broke off the engagement. He demanded the return of the ring, a family heirloom of his grandmother, and asked her to move out of his apartment immediately. He never said how he learned the truth. I do not feel guilty. I told the truth to a person who was cynically deceived. I did not allow myself to be drawn into her drama, but I did not become a silent accomplice to her lies. I freed not only Kyle, I freed myself from years of being a victim, from a sense of duty to a person who never considered me a sister. Perhaps, having hit rock bottom, Stella will finally think and start building her life anew. But that will be her story. My story with her, I hope, is finally over.